But what frustrates me, and it does frustrate me, is that I see a lot of, and I know this world, man. Like I came from it, right? I graduated from the top of my class at Harvard. I've been through Yale Law School. I'm working at a hedge fund in New York. Like, let's just get real here. Like, I know you. We haven't met before, but I know you in some sense of the word, okay? Like, you're not unfamiliar to me. And what I see amongst even my peers, right, is a form of laziness. I think I'm saying this out of respect and not an attack, in a constructive way. I saw a little bit of it in the start of this conversation, right? Where you're going to be able to smoke out a version of that which can be caricatured, but these are our fellow citizens. And their concerns come from a deep place.
Okay.
Where
I'm feeling very triggered right now.
You know, Vivek Ramaswamy is one of those individuals who we really need to pay attention to. He makes a lot of sense. He's very intelligent, balanced. As a presidential candidate, I would say this guy, he impresses me. In this video, he is on the David Pakman show. I've heard of David Pakman, don't personally follow him. Some things I heard are decent, some things not really moved by it, but that's me. But in this one here, Vivek Ramaswamy is going to answer some questions about wokeness, and it gets really interesting. So link in the description below. This is a good interview, by the way, if you want to watch the entire thing. So make sure you like and subscribe to the page if you happen to be new. Click the bell icon for more. Without further ado, let's get to the video.
Good. I have to talk to you about woke and wokeness. You wrote the book. It's in the title. One of the things I'm interested in when it comes to the anti-woke movement and woke as a cancer or a problem is that there's about a half dozen or more polls that show that wokeness seems to be the predominant perspective if you look at the whole country. I won't give you the full list, but just so we put a couple here, there's one poll from Pew, which finds that about 6 in 10 Americans say on the issue of going far enough, the right distance, or not far enough on making trans people feel okay, not discriminated against, understanding their issues. 60% say we've hit the right note, or we actually have not gone far enough. There's one from The Hill about 60% of the country is against any restrictions on drag performances. This is the sort of thing I'm talking about. Maybe you will dispute the numbers, maybe you won't, but those are some of the data I'm working with. Doesn't it seem as though the anti-woke idea is maybe overplaying a hand that might do well in some parts of the country, but won't win a national campaign, as evidenced by what Ron DeSantis is seeing right now, losing 42% of his support in the primary?
So I want to say something which I've said before, but it doesn't seem to matter, but I'm going to say it anyway. The media seems to be the one that uses a label of anti-woke to describe my campaign. I am running a campaign to revive national identity. And at the time I wrote Woke Inc., you know what people criticized the title back then? People said, nobody knows what this word is.
Okay.
So at the time I wrote the book, that was actually the chief criticism of the title. And unlike many on both the left and right, I will define exactly what it is that I view as a symptom of a deeper malaise in our current.
I thought you were going to define woke itself.
No, well, wokeness is a symptom, and I will define the symptom, but it is also a deeper cancer. And wokeness is a worldview that says that there are certain invisible social relationships between us, grounded on oppression or oppressor relationships and statuses of people, based on race, gender, and sexuality.
To be honest, wokeness is just a modern day version of Marxism. It's just a rebranded version of Marxism. That's simply what it is. It just doesn't look like that. When you look at it, it sounds very compassionate, caring, and loving to do. But when you kind of peel off the layer of wokeness, you find out underneath is the concept of the oppressed and the oppressor. And yeah, that's just, it's a Marxist theology. That's why Black Lives Matter movement was able to latch onto wokeness, and they were able to do the things that they did. And also you find out that the Black Lives Matter, for example, where they themselves were trained Marxist because it fits, you know what I'm saying? So there's a text in the Bible that says, can two walk together except they be agreed?
that you're either oppressor or oppressed based on those genetic attributes, that there are invisible societal injustices resulting from them, and that we have to be awake, alert to those injustices and then correct for them. Left or right, I think that that's a neutral definition that describes at least what we're talking about here.
I have a different one, which is much simpler, which is simply becoming woke is becoming aware that there are problems in our society bigger than any one person's circumstances.
It's not that simple, buddy. I mean, I think that's not a fair definition to what the terminology is. Maybe David Pakman is, I can tell he's honest, but he's wrong. This is worse than what he is describing it to be. When you simplify it like that, you make it seem to be like, it's not that big of a deal. You know what I'm saying? We're just becoming awake to circumstances that, not one person could fix. So we have a systematic problem, I guess. So everybody needs to be part of the fixing of that problem, which is not true. That's not what wokeness is. In nature, it's worse than that. It's impacting everything. It is a cancer. It is not a good thing. And I think a lot of companies are beginning to realize that wokeness is not good. Some people are pushing back now. Some businesses are pushing against DEI. And I think especially with the Bud Light fiasco, a lot of businesses are second guessing this idea of, do I want to do diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion in my business because it's hurting us financially. So wokeness is not a good thing. And whenever you placing the value of somebody else, whether it is their skin color, sexuality, perspective, diversity, you placing that above another person is bad. So wokeness is really a movement that is rooted in anti-whiteism. So when you look at what wokeness is pushing, it's everything against white people. And if you happen to be a straight white conservative, so a straight white conservative male, so should I say Christian male today, wokeness is against you, because it's kind of like the goal is to uproot supposedly the straight white male Christian, the straight white Christian conservative male from society. That's really what it is. I'm just being honest, because when I look at it, I'm like, yep, it's a move against white people, but it's a racist ideology when you actually check it out. But it does impact everything. But I could also say the wokeness goes against everything that is Christian as well. When you look at what wokeness is promoting, in wokeness, there's CRT, critical race theory. That is also very anti-Christian in a way that everything in America is racist and everything. And we're supposed to just hate America because there's systematic racism and so on. So anyway, let's get back to the video.
That's how I define it. And I know it's very different from what you're saying.
That's a slightly different definition, and one that is set up for more people to agree with it. But I think that that's not, respectfully, David, that's a definition that on its own does not support the specificity of policies that follow from it, right? Racial quota systems in boardrooms. The fact that a company cannot list on NASDAQ unless it has a certain number of quotas filled by racial minorities or sexual minorities on its board. That is a much more specific instantiation that closely tracks my definition of wokeness than a general definition that there are just vaguely some things wrong in the world that are systems that don't result from individual behavior. Well, okay, that's a big leap to get from there to racial quota systems, especially when actually in that very rule, and I'm just triple clicking on that just to get specific, but it is not an outlier. It is an example of what we see pervasively, where people then came back and said, well, how about veteran status or disability status? To which the government, the SEC, and the NASDAQ said no, because that would reduce the desired forms of diversity on that board. So we are talking about very specific instantiations of a culture that we can't just elide in the form of a general neutral definition that there are some unfair systems that we need to correct for them. That's not the essence of the claim that alone would support the range of policies that we see. And so I think we have to owe it to ourselves to at least be specific and get on the table, where I'll give Ibram Kendi at least some credit for being specific when he expressly says the right answer to past discrimination is present discrimination.
Yep.
The right answer to present discrimination is future discrimination. Those are
Powerful. True. at least they were honest about it. And I think a lot of liberals today, shall I say Democrats as well, they like to make it look like it's not that big of a deal. There is this notion that you guys are stressing this thing too much. There's nothing going on here. There is no such thing as reverse discrimination in the sense that you guys describing it, you know. There's no racism toward white people because white people, they're the one who have the power and privilege. You know, they have white privilege, right? So therefore, racism, black people cannot be racist toward white people kind of thing. Like, they will go as far as to say that if you happen to be black and a Christian and a conservative, you're a coon, man. You're you're Uncle Tom kind of thing, which Uncle Tom was a good character, by the way. But so there was this idea that these people are promoting. But the issue that I have with the Dems and also many liberals, they like to sugarcoat real issues. They like to put new definitions on them. They acknowledge these things are not good, right? They will talk about Antifas. They're like, oh my goodness, Antifa doesn't even exist kind of thing until things got really, really bad. You know what I'm saying? When people are saying, hey, the Black Lives Matter movement is pushing something here that is not really American at all. To say that is like, you must be a white supremacist. But it's like, not necessarily. It's just that there's a lot of stuff that they're pushing that goes against the very foundation and principles of this country. So why are we pushing that? So when you call out these different things, oftentimes people put on their defensive mode. But the truth is, like you said, again, wokeness is a cancer. And a little sugar-coated version definition of wokeness is part of the reasons why we are in this mess. You know, that's why, you know, grown men with, I guess, kinkish outfit think they can shake their junk in front of children. That's what wokeness allows to happen. Wokeness makes it possible for all this stuff to become normal. Wokeness also opens the door for gender ideology and reassignment surgeries because, you know, they were oppressed and yada, yada, yada. So these people should be given a right to do the things that they do. And when they do evil, they are protected. Under wokeness, a transgender mass shooter, I mean, we can't even get a manifesto from that individual, right? Until I know Vivek Ramaswamy is suing to get the manifesto released. But wokeness is protecting that. Businesses are losing money because of wokeness. They're pushing all kind of ESG scores, you know, DEI scores, and that's what wokeness does. It's a cancer that comes under the notion I'm here to help, but it is rooted in selfishness and pride. It is more tearing everything apart while claiming to be helping solving the issues of our society, and that's not okay.
Those are his words, not mine. You have to take people like Ayanna Pressley at their word. We don't want any more black or brown faces that don't want to be a black or brown voice. I know that's a little bit uncomfortable to smoke out because it makes a lot of my friends on the left uncomfortable because they don't want to agree with those exact statements, even though they do want to agree with the more neutral definition of wokeness that you provided. But we have to smoke that out where there are policies that directly track what the leading advocates of this movement have said in their own words. That's not me putting words into anybody else's mouth. And I think we just have to own that up and get that on the table so we can actually have an honest, clean-hearted debate about it.
He's roasting him.
Yeah,
right,
what's interesting about that is most of the examples you're coming up with as someone on the progressive left are not examples I would defend. And simultaneously, it sounds like you're also not denying that when it comes to the way we treat people, when it comes to the questions asked in these polls about wokeness, when it comes to trans, controlling books, drag shows, etc., I'm not hearing that that's actually the fight you really want to have, which if that's the case, I like that. I think that that's good.
Yeah, well, here's the one fight on that narrow issue that I do care to have is as it relates to kids.
Okay.
So I believe that, and what I'm about to say is controversial to some, but I'm going to share my view, and I think it's grounded in history and fact and my true perspective. I think that gender dysphoria, especially in kids, is a mental health condition that and should be treated as such. And for most of our history, all the way through the DSM-4, and I believe the DSM-5 has been viewed that way. When a kid says that their gender does not match their biological sex, that is usually evidence that something else is wrong in their life, and we should get to the bottom of that.
Yes. I've said this in my channel before, right? If a kid is going through something mental, How is it okay to start cutting body parts, removing a healthy breast, cutting I mean, Lord, a phalloplasty, or that is crazy. That is seriously crazy. I mean, just the thought of what's going on here. It's crazy.
I do not believe it is compassionate to affirm that kid's confusion. I believe that is cruelty. I believe 20 years from now, we will look back at allowing kids to undergo genital mutilation and chemical castration in the way that we would also judge Iran for doing the same thing. In Iran, if you're gay, you know what they do? They make you undergo genital mutilation and sex change. I think many gay kids are going through the same thing today because of the trans fixation in really American culture right now. I met two young women, Chloe and Katie, both of whom badly regret decisions they made to undergo double mastectomies and in one case a hysterectomy, as well as chemical castration. They will never, chemical intervention, they will never be the same again either. I think that is barbaric, and for the same reasons that we do not allow kids to get a tattoo before the age of 18, we should not allow kids to undergo genital mutilation or chemical castration.
Now, of course,
the
you
age
can
of
get a
18.
tattoo before the age of 18 with parents' permission, and that's what many want to see.
Actually, in many states you can't.
I'm not aware of any such states, but I take your word that there are some where that's the case. I mean, listen, on that issue, and we're out of
Nice try, David.
time, and I'm going to let you go because I know that that you have a lot of things to get to. On that issue, I do want to say that in every state I'm aware of, the issue of gender dysphoria in kids does start as a behavioral health intervention. I think the question becomes, and I don't pretend to have an answer to this question at this time.
Lord.
How far is it okay to go beyond that? I am with you that I don't yet believe we have the full 2020 hindsight on it.
The one thing I will leave with you on this.
There is more than enough evidence out there to tell you this stuff doesn't work. That's why a country like Finland and France, and I think, is it Germany? I think Germany as well. They saying nope. No, this is not a good thing. Let's stop doing this to our children. And I think even if we don't have all the evidence, we don't have the 2020 to look back and say, this is one thing you don't want to look back and say, oh man, we messed up. Like, is listen to the voice of the transitioners. You don't have to agree with the people who are the Christians or the conservatives on the right, whatever. You may not agree with them, but the people who's been through the experience and they're telling you what it was like to go through that, you should listen to them, because what they're telling you is based on physical, actual, real experience of theirs. You cannot overlook their voices. And I think that alone should tell us everything we need to know.
Too, and you seem like I appreciate your reasoned approach here to having a conversation. Something I don't always get is
true.
If gender dysphoria is such a condition of suffering, and I believe it is, in the rare instances in which it occurs, why on earth are we now going out of our way to create more of it? By purposefully weaving in the possibilities for gender confusion at ages where literally, and there's good evidence to back this up, when there's one case of gender dysphoria in a school, it spreads. Like you could do the R squared math on this, right? It's like you could compare that to COVID, the spread of COVID, and you can epidemiologically model this stuff. Yes, this is actually having an effect that we're going out of our way to create a condition that we say creates more suffering. I'll give you one example in New Hampshire, where I travel frequently. The state just shot down a piece of legislation. All it said was, if a kid in school identifies as a gender different than their biological sex, the parent has a right to know. And over a lot of activism and opposition, they shot that bill down, which is odd because the whole premise is that kids are at heightened risk of suicide, in fact. And so a parent doesn't have the right to know if their kid's showing up in school with the condition that the whole premise for the movement was the kid is at higher risk of mental health condition or suicide. It says there's something else going on here.
Yes, there is. There is. And that's what I said earlier. When you study Marxism, they always had an issue with the family. Like the goal is to always either keep the family out of the story of what is really going on, is to destroy the nuclear family. And this division between children and parents is crucial to push this ideology, because it can't happen if parents are aware of what's going on. And that's why they push it, because the goal is to keep you guys from knowing what is happening. So it's one thing you send your children to school. When they're in school, the school will have clothing for them, will have all this different stuff that the kids could put on, and before they go home, they can take it off and go back to home being, that's just ridiculous. Like, some books children can read in school that are laced with sexual perverted ideologies, but they're not allowed to take this. They can check out the book and take it home, but they can read it at the school library. Like, to say something like that and not tell me there isn't something sick behind the scene, you're gonna have a hard time convincing me otherwise.
Yeah,
Right, this is not compassion.
we talked about one of those laws recently. I expressed the same concern, which is I understand the two forces here. The idea of we don't necessarily want to, quote, out a child that is not ready, or maybe outed into an unsafe home environment on the one hand, the other side being exactly what you're saying. So I think all of these issues are more complicated than both
And David,
sides.
before we rock and roll,
It's not that complicated. And I think it's very difficult for a lot of people on the left to defend their position, because your politics, your policies on the left are the ideas that many people on the right, and many Christians as well, are against. Don't get me wrong, there are Christians on the left. The poll shows somewhere about 30%, but on the right, it's somewhere about 60% that will somewhat have faith in Jesus or believe in God of some sort. But here's the thing. I don't know how I would have been being on the left and knowing that they pushing things that are very much against my values, and yet I'm still voting for them. Like, the left is not changing their perspective. The Democrats are very much bold with pushing their demonic ideologies. They're pushing it. They don't care. So I think David is in a very tough position. That's why I'm like, I don't know how you can be against what the left is doing and yet you're still on their team. It's kind of like, if you know they're not going to change, if you know they are determined to push these things forward, why are you there? It's best you remain independent, or you become a Republican, or I don't know, you stay out of politics altogether. I don't know. That's just me though. If I know this is going on, there is no way I'm gonna just be there and supporting the movement in the hope of fixing it from within. You know, like Martin Luther approach kind of thing is like, I don't want to separate from the church, but I want to help the church to be better kind of thing. Only to find out they're not going to change. You need to fall in line with them. And that's the problem here.
before we rock and roll on this, but on just a synthesis of this conversation, I just feel,
He's about to say something that is going to blow your mind. Listen to this. I'm going to let him finish till the end, okay?
rock and roll on this, but on just a synthesis of this conversation, I just feel, I'm on a mission to lead not a political party, but a nation. And I will share with you a commitment that I'm willing to make. And I hope that provides some inspiration to people who disagree with me on many issues like yourself. To
I
maybe
hope
do the same.
you're not about to offer me press secretary.
We have to get to know each other better before I make that offer. But maybe you're on the short list. I don't know. But here's what I'll say.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that we all need to do better of smoking out the best argument for the side that we actually disagree with, to contend with that, not with some caricature of it. And so I, for my part, believe that I'm doing that in this campaign. And if you spot an instance where you think I'm not, then get that on the table. But what frustrates me, and it does frustrate me, is that I see a lot of, and I know this world, man. Like, I came from it, right? I graduated from the top of my class at Harvard. I've been through Yale Law School. I'm working at a hedge fund in New York. Like, let's just get real here. Like, I know you. We haven't met before, but I know you in some sense of the word, okay? Like, you're not unfamiliar to me. And what I see amongst even my peers, right, is a form of laziness. I think I'm saying this out of respect and not an attack, in a constructive way. I saw a little bit of it in the start of this conversation, right? Where you're going to be able to smoke out a version of that which can be caricatured, but these are our fellow citizens.
Yeah.
And their concerns come from a deep place
Okay.
where if you can do a better job of articulating and smoking out where that concern comes from, then we have an obligation to do it. And that's what gives me my motivation in this race, where people will say, somebody living 50 miles radius of where I am in central Ohio today and say, well, they say the First Amendment applies to tech companies. They're rubes because they don't know that that only applies to the government. Actually, to double click on that and say, you know what, there's something to that intuition. And it turns out if a private actors doing what the government actually implicitly goaded them to do, then the First Amendment does apply. In every instance, to be able to say that when there's something of value there, don't just sweep that under the rug and reject it, smoke it out, and then let's have that real debate.
I
and
think
with respect
that's
to the
a
woke
fair
or trans
point.
case, I'll do the same.
I'm going to resign.
Wow. Well done, Vivek. I think this was amazing. I don't know where David Pakman perspective and approach or motivation is. Oh, what is the nature behind this interview? But I don't need to know. But I think it was very decent that he allowed him on his show, allowed Vivek Ramaswamy on his show, and giving him the space to speak. And I think very few people on the left are willing to do that. The fact they're willing to platform a Republican candidate and allow him to share his thoughts. Good. This is good look for the alternative media, because most mainstream media will not do that. Well, I know MSNBC has and ABC has kind of like welcome him and stuff like that, but it always feels like a debate though. This is not so much of a debate. This is more like a nice discussion. They have things that they disagree about, but for the most part, this was well done though. I think this was great. Ramaswamy is on point. Okay, Vivek is just so good. The issue with David that I have here is the carelessness, the passivity that, I think that's kind of what bothers me with a lot of these people is they refuse to acknowledge that there are some real issues, and they might acknowledge the problem, but when they do, it's almost like a sugar-coated version of what is really going on. So they pacify it. And I think Vivek Ramaswamy did a great job calling this out. And I'll tell you what, I think nothing hurts society more than this level of carelessness. So at the end, when he says, I know you, I know I've dealt with people like yourself, Some people just want to have this conversation just to say, I did bring Vivek Ramaswamy to my channel, It's on record. So good. So I'm a good man now. I did the right thing. I think the conversation sometimes it's not so much for the purpose of fixing anything. It's just like, let's just talk about it. We agree and disagree. Let's move on. And that's part of my issue here is what's the purpose of this conversation? It's good to have it. I mean, we benefit and we hear and I get to react and all that. That's good. But where is this going to go? Are we having this conversation because we're looking to bring about some serious changes, making some things agree to disagree on some things? But anyway, that's beside the point. I'm just asking those questions because sometimes I'm like, I think it's just for the show. I think it's just for the YouTube algorithm. It feels like that. It feels like it's just, yeah, look, I had Vivek Ramaswamy on my channel kind of thing, There's no power in that. Talking about carelessness, I just want to acknowledge this. Some people, just like Jesus speaks about in the book of Matthew 7, there's a danger in knowing what to do and doing nothing about it. There's a danger in talking about all these different things and actually not doing things differently. Everyone that heareth these sayings of mine and do with them not. Let me give you a different version just for the sake of time. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock. And the rain fell, and the flood came, and the wind blew and beat on the house. And it did not fall, because he had been founded on the rock. So there is this notion in scripture. Once you hear something that is true, you also have to do them. I could say a lot more, but this is more than enough. And I think part of the issue that I have with the left, they hear the message, they hear the complaints, they politicize stuff as if it doesn't matter. The right, they do it too, by the way. In some level, they do it too. I think the right is very lazy about a number of things. They would have all the facts. Even when they have the power to do something about something, they will just let it go in the name of being nice. That's just as wrong. So, yeah. So we either are among the wise who do something about what we know and what we are told. And this is primarily spiritual, but there's a way you can apply this in a societal standpoint as well. Or you can be a foolish man. Once you hear this stuff, you act like it doesn't matter. You do not do them. That's two things. You're either going to do something about some of this stuff that you're hearing, or you're going to do nothing about it. And again, to each his own. Thank you for listening, though. This was a great video. This was a great discussion. There's a lot in this that I really enjoyed. So share your thought and perspective with me. Where do you stand when it comes to Vivek Ramaswamy? What did you agree or disagree with in the video below? Let me know. Link in the description below. For those of you who are looking for merch, I don't think I have this one on my channel yet, but it's coming up. I'm working on it. A different version of it, but God wins. I know some of you mentioned that shirt. But if you go to my store, you'll find some things there you can put on. So go and support the channel that way as well. Special thanks to all my Patreon as well. So you guys have been amazing. All right. Have a good one. Bye.